Good morning and good afternoon. Thank you for joining DynTek for today's webinar on cyber liability and MFA. My name is Brett Harmon, and I will help moderate today's presentation. During the presentation, all lines will remain muted. However, you can ask questions at any time by using the Q&A feature in your control panel, and we will address questions at the end of the presentation. In addition, today's presentation is being recorded, and we will send you a replay of the event as a reference or to share with your colleagues. Today, I'm pleased to welcome Joe Rubino, Senior Vice President, and Will Wilson, Principal Architect of Network Security, as our featured presenters. Joe, you have the floor.
Thank you, Brett. Good morning and good afternoon. My name is Joe Rubino, as Brett mentioned. I'm the SVP for DynTek, and we run a lot of the security activities here at DynTek for our customers. And welcome to today's Zero Trust Security webinar, where we're going to talk a little bit about multi-factor authentication specifically. And I just wanted to do a quick intro that many of the activities we do today with our customers, whether it be multi-factor authentication or any number of other security initiatives for customers, when we generally work with IT and we have conversations with our customers about what the drivers behind those projects, almost every time we get in those discussions, a lot of these controls that are required by cyber liability insurance carriers and brokers have a number of controls that we want to work with, and multi-factor authentication is one of the major and core controls required by cyber insurance companies. And we're pleased to present to you today MFA as part of a series of a number of controls that we are working with customers on that help broaden your security capability and posture throughout the organization, meeting NIST requirements, meeting the cyber control framework for insurance, and ultimately those investments in the security help save money in other ways, and specifically in your cyber insurance policies. I'm going to talk a few minutes about multi-factor authentication as it relates to cyber insurance, and I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Will to take you through some of the aspects of business and technology and a demo of MFA for everyone out there, and then we'll open it up for questions. When we engage with customers today, we're really having conversations around what we consider 12 major controls, specifically by the carriers. A few years back, it was a questionnaire. They asked if you had MFA, and you answered the questionnaire, you signed it in, you got a quote. Now, more recently, it's not only a questionnaire, but it's an attestation. It's auditing by the cyber insurance carriers to ensure that you have a number of these controls in place. MFA is again, as I mentioned, is one of those core controls. And really one of the big areas and why it's so important is I don't want to read off the slide here. You can see for yourself, but 80% of data breaches involve the use of weak passwords or stolen credentials. Every breach that happens today, there's a piece of information about you that ends up on the dark web. As the bad actors begin to put these pieces together, they use by leveraging phishing attempts and attacks and other social engineering hacks. The possibilities they obviously could end up with your credentials via login and password, and MFA really can provide a significant add-on and validation to those users. And in some cases, it's not only MFA requirements for the end users, but we're finding it's requirement for backups. It's required for privileged access management to core systems and monitoring and managing those assets as well. So today we're going to focus on an MFA. The other item I'd like to reinforce here is that 20% of your cyber insurance premium reductions are in play when you have not only MFA implemented. Well, it's going to cover some of the requirements, of the implementation of those controls, so you can realize that 20%. So really, the benefits, as a summary, is your increased security, reduce the risk of data breaches, lower your cyber insurance premiums, and then the challenges is implementing it in such a way where you can improve your overall user experience. So I just wanted to come up with that intro and talk about the relevance of multi-factor authentication as it relates to the business and your organization. And at this point, I'm going to stop sharing, and I'm going to turn over to my colleague Will to dig in a little deeper on this technology. Will?
Thank you much. Let me move over to my share now. All right, hopefully everyone should be seeing my screen with my presentation. Thanks for the handoff, Joe. So as you mentioned, I'm Will Wilson, Principal Architect for Network Security at DynTek. So Joe already set up a lot of information about compliance and security. MFA is important for security and not just compliance. For your cyber insurance and statutory compliance for your various sectors, we need to worry about hitting that checkbox. But products like Duo also help you with pragmatic security. Joe mentioned some user acceptance and discussed how it can actually help your users by not having too many complex passwords to remember. We're going to discuss some of that in regards to passwordless authentication and SSO, how that can help you. I also want to talk a little bit about perceived cost and complexity. Implementing MFA does cost money. There's licensing costs, but as Joe mentioned, it can reduce your costs for your cyber insurance by 20%. Implementing a good MFA solution also helps you with a single sign-on environment. By having a single sign-on environment, while you might be having certain capital expense to implement this, it could actually be lowering your operational expense by making it easier for your administrators to have one single pane of glass where they're managing consolidated user identities. So we talked about MFA, which is multi-factor authentication, something you have, something you know, something you are. Now I want to dial that back a little bit and talk a little bit about passwordless authentication and single sign-on. Depending on the type of business you're in, you may be able just to change from a single password authentication to a token-based authentication. This removes the burden from the user so they don't need to remember multiple passwords and puts it to just something they have, and in some cases something they are. In the case of a Duo token, like this UBIS token I have here, this is something I have, but it also integrates my fingerprint. So without having to remember a zillion passwords for several different systems, I can plug this into my USB port, put my thumb on it, and get my thumbprint authentication, and it's going to log me in. That's going to meet the criteria of many of your cyber insurance companies and your regulatory compliance without causing a huge burden on your users. The next piece that helps you with users is acceptance is single sign-on. Instead of having multiple separate systems where you have to log into each system, products such as Duo can put it all in one place. During the demo, I'm going to show you where in Duo we go to create single sign-on and to pull from multiple different sources and be able to push that to multiple different applications. That allows the user to sign in once and then be authorized in multiple different locations. You can do this with passwords and a Duo token and a Duo push, or with just passwordless authentication. On the other side of the spectrum, we have zero trust. In the zero trust environment, we say nothing is trusted. You assume everything can be hacked. And with this, we're going to add in continuous verification. In this environment, we can use additional features of Duo, such as device health, risk-based authentication, and threat detection. So once you've already authenticated with the something you know, something you are, and something you have, this is going to continue to monitor what's your device health. Does it have all the patches? Is the virus scan up to date? Where are you coming from? And even better, it could be tied into other products that are going to help with behavioral analytics. When you tie it in with behavioral analytics, it can start looking at things and saying, you're not behaving the way you should behave. In this zero trust environment, I might be an administrator that has access to all these different SharePoint sites and all these corporate resources, but suddenly I'm doing things that aren't normal. Now, because it's detecting a not normal behavior, the threat detection capabilities can say, I detect a threat, and I'm going to change this user from being an authorized user to a non-authorized user. Another factor of user acceptance is, how do you authenticate? Some users don't use smartphones, or they work in an environment where they're not allowed to have a smartphone. The most common way we authenticate with Duo is through the Duo mobile app. It's a nice, simple application that you install, and when you try to log into something, it pushes to your phone and you say, yes, it's me. Alternatively, you can also add to the security of that by saying, don't just say, yes, it's me, also type in a code that comes on the screen. If you are in an environment where they can't do that, tokens are awesome. The graphic I have shows a token that's a very inexpensive Duo token that you can get en masse from Cisco. This is a 6-digit code that when you authenticate, it's going to say, what is your code? And I can show you in my demo where we potentially put that. Many users don't like having to type in 6-digit codes, so that's where things like the YubiKey come into place. There are multiple vendors that are able to support these type of tokens, but I've noticed that the YubiKey is the most common one. With this one, I can just plug in a USB key, and when I plug in this USB key, I push a button on it, and I optionally have a fingerprint on it if it supports it, and that's going to let me in. The next option that we support is SMS text. If you've got users with basic flip phones, and they're willing to use their cell phones, but they don't have the Duo mobile app because they're not using smartphones, you can just push a code on SMS and put that code into the Duo app. One caution on this methodology is you do have a fixed number of tokens of how many times you can send SMS messages for each user account. The plus side is this is a huge number. Very few organizations are going to send so many SMS pushes that they exceed their count. In my very small account that's a 10-user account, I've banked thousands of SMS text pushes in all the number of demos I've given. The next point of discussion is, what are your license options? The cost of getting started with Duo is absolutely nothing, other than the experience and expertise of your system administrators that need to implement it. When you sign up for Duo, you can go to the Duo webpage and you can register for a free trial for 30 days. It's going to give you access to all the features. After your 30 days, if you don't choose to purchase a Duo plan, it puts you in the free tier. The free tier has 10 users and only has multi-factor authentication. That actually works for a lot of small organizations or for organizations that want to continue doing some testing before committing. The Essentials license includes MFA and also includes a single sign-on that I discussed, and this passwordless authentication. For many organizations, this is all they will ever need, and this only costs $3 per user per month. If you need to move to a zero trust environment, then you need Advantage. The Advantage license will give you the device health, risk-based authentication, and threat detection. In the demo that I'm about to start in a minute, I'm only going to go through the basic SSO and MFA, but if anyone's interested in additional demos later, please contact DynTek and we can do a full demonstration including all the features of Advantage. The next tier is Premier. Premier is for remote access. This includes a Zero Trust Network Gateway. The Zero Trust Network Gateway allows you to install an appliance in your DMZ, and with this appliance, you can reach into your network using the Duo client on trusted hosts. The Duo client not only is used to talk to this network gateway, but it also monitors the health of your workstation and determines if you're trusted. This is useful for being able to make changes of authorization where it determines, never mind, you're not trusted, I'm going to restrict your access. However, as long as your host is configured as a trusted asset, it's going to allow users in seamlessly. When they initially authenticate to Duo, they'll do their one-time push, and then that's going to allow their workstation to continually get accesses to resources inside of your network that are configured on this network gateway. With that, I'm going to move over to my demo. For sake of brevity, my demo is only going to include setting up basic authentication to one source, showing Windows authentication and VPN authentication. I've already pre-staged almost everything, so I'm going to show you where you get the information and how to use it. So now I should be sharing my screen of my virtual machine that's my domain controller. On my domain controller, I'm already logged into Duo. The reason I selected my domain controller is because it's got information on the Duo webpage that I want to use when I'm configuring Duo. Many users have policies that say their domain controllers aren't allowed to get directly out to the internet. If you have these policies, you can still configure Duo. You just need to get all the information and the application and move it over to your domain controller for configuration. You also do not need to install this on a domain controller. The installation is easier on a domain controller, but you can install it on any Windows host that has reachability via the LDAP protocol to your domain controller. So in this case, I have single sign-on. You should notice that I've got 3 different single sign-ons configured. However, for the purposes of this demonstration, I've disabled all except one of them. You can add any source that is either a on-premises Active Directory controller or any SAML identity provider. Duo comes with some options for common identity providers where it gives you documentation on exactly how to do it and makes it easy for you. However, as long as it's a SAML 2.0 identity provider, you can configure it. In my example, I'm using the on-premises Active Directory because that still meets the needs of most organizations. In this case, I'm going to configure my Active Directory domain controller, and I'm going to start by configuring information about my domain. You give it a display name. This is a horrible display name because it just says Active Directory. If I have multiple domains, I might want to say, what is the domain I'm using here? Then I configure the internal IP address of my domain controller. In a real environment, you're going to have multiple domain controllers. The next criteria I have is my base distinguished name. What's a distinguished name using LDAP of where I want to start looking for users and groups? In my case, I have it at the root of my domain, but I don't need to have it at the root of my domain. And I can add multiple base DNs. So if I want to be able to search from different bases in your forest, we can look at different places in the forest. And for the most part, everything else here is default. The next setting is adding a proxy. So if I want to add a proxy, I click on Add Authentication Proxy. When you add an authentication proxy, it has the option to download the installer and it gives you information you need. I'm going to click out of this because I want to configure the proxy I already have. So I have a proxy that's already up and configured, and I've already downloaded the app. When you download the app and run the installer, all it's going to do is install this app as a service, and then it's going to bring you up to this Duo Authentication Proxy Manager application. So now once I've installed it, I've downloaded the installer, and it brought up the configuration file. It gives me something I need to put in, copy and paste. I'm using integrated authentication, so I don't actually need to put my service account username and password. If I'm running it on another host, I'm going to need to put this in. Once I get this done and saved, I generate a command. I didn't really need to generate this command because I've already run this in the recent past, but let me do command, run as administrator, and paste this command. When you first run this command, quite often you get an error if you haven't actually validated and saved in Duo, but it's okay. And after we do this, we're going to run a test and you'll see you're connected to Duo. This should get you up and running with the basic authentication proxy. That gets you halfway. Next thing we're going to do is go to users. You can manually create users, such as my Will account here, that's a local account, or you can pull accounts from your directory. To pull accounts from a directory, we want to go to your directory sync. When I go to my directory sync, I can create a connection. When I create this connection, it's going to give me information like an API directory key. It's going to ask me for what group do I want to use. I've already selected the Windows Group Duo users. However, you can select as many groups as you reasonably want. In this group, I have one single user. This is a good way to restrict it down and save licenses on Duo because you don't want your entire directory of potentially thousands of users being pushed into Duo and taking up your license. When you do this, it's going to bring in the users. I like to check the box to send an enrollment email. Typically, you're going to contact all your users, let them know beforehand that you're about to enroll everyone in Duo. This is a good way to make sure they know that it's not going to be some sort of phishing attack when they get their enrollment email. For the enrollment email to work, you need to have an email address set up in your Active Directory. If the Active Directory doesn't have email address and it imports the accounts, it won't have anywhere to send it to. However, if you do, you click this button. As soon as it finds a new user and it runs this sync, it's going to pull that user in. It's going to send that user an email saying, use this QR code, and based on this QR code, register for Duo. And then it helps them get ahead of the curve before you start protecting your applications with Duo. So once you run this, it's going to sync your users. In my case, I had one user, Duo user. It pulled this user in, and we can see this user's in this group. I'm going to go touch on this user a little bit more as I pass through the demo. One thing I want to point out is this user's already been enrolled with both a YubiKey and with a phone. So I've already enrolled this user two different ways. An average user is most likely going to only register with their phone. If you need to add a hardware token or a phone, you just click the add phone or add hardware token. Alternatively, you can give them bypass codes if this is like a contractor that doesn't come in frequently, and when they come in, they need to ask for permission. And you say, okay, I'm going to give you a bypass code right now, and that bypass code is going to be used for a short period of time. So once I configure all this information and get it from the Duo service, I got the RI key. I got this and copied and pasted it directly from the Duo web page. The next part that I got was the iKey, SKey, and API host that was all directly from the Duo web page. This is copy and paste. For demonstration purposes, even though I don't need it on this specific instance, I showed what do I do if I need to have a username and password. In this case, I use service account username and service account password. This account only has read-only access. It's a standard user. You may notice in this case, it's unencrypted. I like to configure everything as unencrypted, and then once it's done, I encrypt it. It's very simple to encrypt the file. I had set it up on a web page. It looks like it refreshed, but there's a command you run. You run a single command, and that command is going to encrypt all the shared keys and passwords in your Duo configuration file. This encryption has replay tamper-proof feature. That means that you can't take that config file that's already encrypted and put it on another Duo authentication proxy. It grabs information specific to the particular install of the proxy and encrypts using that information. So if you take that config file and you put it in your other auth proxy, it won't work. That's in order to prevent replay attacks. The next thing I want to show is how am I going to use this to actually protect an application? So to protect an application, I'm going to go to the application section. Duo has quite a few applications already built in. If you click protect an application, you can just scroll through all the applications where they've got documentation and forms that are very specific to this application. But at the end of the day, any application that supports standard protocols such as SAML or Radius will work. So now I already have a pre-staged application. The first one I want to show is my FortiGate SSL VPN. I picked this so I could show that the Cisco Duo is not completely centric to Cisco ASAs or Firepower. We can use it with other proxies, with other products. In this case, when I create the application for the Fortinet SSL VPN, it gives me an integration key, a secret key, and an API host name. That's all it really gives me other than setting up policies that are out of scope of this presentation. To know what to do with this, I'm going to click on the button Fortinet Documentation. So let's say I'm not familiar with Radius and how to create a proxy. I can scroll down and hit play on this wonderful video here where it's going to walk you through step by step everything you need to do from the absolute first step of not having Duo even talking to your Active Directory until having Radius up and running on your Fortinet SSL VPN. So now as I go through this, I can say, okay, what are all the steps? I already know all these steps, so I don't need to read through this. So let's say you're fairly tech savvy, you know about Radius and how to configure Radius and the fundamentals of Duo. So I'm going to scroll down through all this documentation and get to the point where it says, here's my completed file that it should look like. When I configured this, I actually took this technique where I copied this, did a copy and paste into my Duo auth proxy, and then I change it to what I need. I changed the host for the IP address of my internal domain controller, put in my user account name and password, and I put the search name for where do I want to start searching. So this allows it to find the domain controller to authenticate after it gets a Radius request. The general flow is when you get a request on Radius, it's going to verify that user is in Duo by talking to an API call on Duo. And then after it verifies the push and says, okay, I trust this user, it's going to then go to what it's a client of. In my case, I made it an AD client. You don't need to make it an AD client. You can actually make this a client of another Radius server. You can make it an LDAP client. So I copied and pasted this, and then after that, I swapped out the correct information for my network. Now let's see this in action. So now if I want to see this in action, let's go and emulate a Radius event on my Duo. So I'm going to go into my VPN configuration. This is as simple as the VPN Radius server configuration is on the FortiGate side. It doesn't even really know about Duo. It's saying I've got some Radius server at this IP address, and this is a shared secret. That's all the Fortinet really cares about. Now I'm going to say test user credentials. My user credentials are Duo user, and let's type in my password. Now as I test it, I get a Duo push, and I accept my Duo push. And this shows I'm successfully logged in. I could test this again. This time when I get my Duo push, I said no. And it's coming back and saying the Radius server rejected it. It didn't come back. If I want to go back to my users and look at the log for my test account, I'm going to be able to see that I actually got a FortiGate SSL push, and this succeeded. Now I'm going to quickly move on to a demonstration using Windows login. I realize I'm starting to run a little bit on the long time, so I'm going to try to make this as quick as possible without sacrificing the demonstration. So in this case, I'm going to log in, and I don't have Duo installed on this client yet. I've already logged into Duo and got as far as downloading the client. Even though in this demonstration I'm using an exe that I need to configure, you can push this through group policy. However, if I were to push this through group policy, it's not going to make for a very exciting demo. So I accept the push to log into my Duo account. And I got a couple of things here talking about some warnings. So now I'm going to go into my application and Microsoft RDP. When they created the connector for Duo in Windows, it was originally for a remote desktop protocol. However, as we're going to demonstrate, this works just fine on a normal desktop and not just remote desktop. So let's run this installer. Got my UAC prompt. Click next. And what's the API host name? API host name is right here. Grab it, put it in. I don't have any proxy in my network, so what's my integration key? Grab my integration key, grab my secret key. Again, I'm doing this manually for demonstration purposes. You can do all this through group policy. So now it has a couple options. What do I want to do when it's offline? In general, you typically want to allow offline authentication and create a offline Duo push. I'm going to turn that off for this demonstration. The next option is auto push to authenticate if available. My account has both a hardware token, a USB token, and a phone. Because I've got a phone with Duo Mobile, if it can reach my phone and do an auto push, it won't even try the token. So if you've got users that have both a token and a phone, then you may want to disable this and say that they actually have to click the button to say send a push. And this choice here is, do I want this to only work when I'm using remote desktop? I don't want it for only remote desktop. I want it to be my primary login. We're not going to use smart cards. Next thing is, I want this also for UAV. So I want this so that when there's escalation privileges, that it's going to give me another Duo push. This feature requires a reboot, so I'm not going to demonstrate it today. But this is valuable if you have things where they're logged in as a user, but that user can't make changes like open up Active Directory users and computers without escalating their privileges, can't make certain changes. This isn't quite to the point of full privilege access management, but it gets you partway there. If you have a requirement for full privilege access management, Cisco's partnered with CyberArk. And with CyberArk and Duo combined, you can have a nice seamless solution that does full privilege access management. So now what am I going to do? I'm going to hit install. Now after installing and finished, let's log off and see if it works. So now when I do that and I come in, it's stopping me at the screen saying, do I want to send a push or do I want to enter a passcode? It's only stopping here because I unchecked the box that says automatically push. I'm doing this because I want to manage this and I want to set my removable device to go to my token, which I plugged in upside down. And I want to map my YubiKey to my virtual machine here. So now I'm going to say enter a passcode. And I'm just going to touch the button on my YubiKey and it's going to log me in. Alternately, I could have done a push from my phone, but I want to demonstrate that I have the flexibility of using either my YubiKey for Windows login, where the user didn't need to even have a phone, or I could have done a push to my phone. Now, as it logs in, I'm going to go ahead and stop this. And get back to my share. So this concluded what I wanted to show in my demo. Again, if you have interest in learning more about Duo, we can provide a much larger demonstration where we go through absolutely everything you're interested in seeing for your specific environment.
Great. Thank you, Joe and Will. As a reminder, please use the Q&A or chat feature to ask any questions. We will be sending you a recording of today's event, and you are welcome to ask any questions via email as well. Let me see if we have anything that's come in. All right. Well, it looks like we don't have any questions at the moment. So I would like to take the opportunity to say thank you all for attending and thank you, Joe and Will, for your presentation today.